Welcome to the Power of Ambition blooper. Welcome to the Power of Ambition podcast. I'm Nicole Serrato, your host, and I'm going to talk today about why a podcast and why talk about the power of ambition. The reason I'm starting this podcast is because I've learned throughout the years, not by myself, but through self-development and reading and listening to mentors. And my journey did not start in filmmaking. Many of you know me as an actress. I've modeled in the past, I've done poetry, and now I'm a filmmaker, directing and writing film, and now a podcaster. So that's quite a journey, and I want to kind of explain, where did I start? Why do I think the power of ambition is important? Where did I even come up with that title? So we'll start there. If you haven't heard of him, I highly recommend you look him up. His name is Jim Rohn. He's a motivational speaker, and he passed away in 2009, unfortunately. But I was inspired by his work in my early 20s. And I'll talk a little bit about what were my early 20s like and how did I end up on this journey. Testing. Oh, I can hear myself. Ah, nice. How's my hair though? Okay. I'm an actress, a filmmaker, a director, and a screenwriter, but that's not where my story started. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California. Many of you know me as Nicole Serrato, but my first name is Amanda. I grew up in a small town of El Sereno. El Sereno, or also known as El Sereno, is a small town in northeast Los Angeles, right outside of downtown LA. Now, this is considered like a low-income poverty neighborhood, but that's not what it felt like growing up initially. I was raised by my father and my grandmother. My father was a single dad. My mother passed away when I was 6 years old. Some of you may know this story. Unfortunately, she was murdered when I was 6, and the case was never solved. So at 6 years old, I started with a very rough time. You know, I lived in San Diego for a bit with my mother and my father, and then she passed away and we moved back to Los Angeles to live life because that's where my dad's from. My dad is also born and raised in Los Angeles. And I just got off to a very rough start, losing my mother at that age and my father working hard as a single father to raise me and my siblings. I'm the middle child. I have an older brother and younger sister. And I have 3 other half siblings as well. But in the home, I grew up with my older brother and my older sister. My grandmother was 74 when my mother passed, and she started helping my father take care of us. But as you can imagine, a 74-year-old taking care of a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old, and an 8-year-old was very challenging. So in the Mexican household, typically the eldest girl tends to be the one that the parents look to pass on certain responsibilities. So I gladly obliged and helped my grandmother, starting at age 11, cook, clean, do the laundry, and even write out the bills for the house. So from a very, very early age, I had to grow up very fast. I didn't understand that in essence was building ambition in me, to want to be more, to want to do more. And my father, you know, he did his best to take care of us. He got us a scholarship to go to a private school when I was 12 years old. And he worked extra hours picking up pallets. I don't know how to say it correctly. So someone out there, just type it in the comments. But he used to pick up pallets to, you know, some people would leave pallets in the back of stores and stuff that they wanted to get rid of. And so cardboard boxes, you know, delivering furniture from out of the closet, like a thrift store in Pasadena, which I used to help him with. So, you know, around that time, I learned very fast that we were not well off and that my dad as a single father struggled, and my grandmother as an 70, 80-year-old woman was aging and, you know, on Social Security and also struggled. And so that's just kind of the life I knew. It's a life of struggle. There was a lot of joy in between that, a lot of beautiful memories that I created with my grandmother, with my father. And I'll talk about that in a bit, but I just want to kind of transition to like that's just kind of the beginning. And there was a lot of talk of how we potentially wouldn't be successful because of our tumultuous beginning. I struggled a lot in school. I didn't know at the time, but I was dyslexic and I couldn't read and I couldn't write at grade level, I think in sixth grade. And teachers would constantly tell my father, she has a lot of potential. I think that was like my least favorite phrase. Like whenever someone ever said, you have potential, I'm like, it's like chalk, like, what's that called? Chalk on a chalkboard? No, wait. Yeah. No, chalk. It's chalk? Anyways, I think it's chalk on a blackboard. There we go. Chalk on a blackboard. That phrase just makes me cringe because I heard it my whole life and I didn't understand what it meant. But fortunately, I went through high school and I got my first job when I was 14 because we struggled so much and my dad, I felt like he needed help and I needed shoes. And so I decided to go out and get a job and I started working at Subway. And they didn't know I was 15. They thought I was 16. I told them my age. I swear I put the correct date of birth on the application, but for some reason they still hired me and didn't realize until after that I was under the age that I was supposed to be working, but they didn't fire me. So I started at Subway at 14 years old and worked there until 19. My father was extremely strict, so towards the end of my teenage years, we just started really butting heads. After I graduated from high school, barely graduated from high school, I got into Cal State LA on probation, as long as I completed that summer or something with some classes. But my father and I had it out, and it just I ended up moving out of my house at 18 to kind of create my own life and my own peace. And I didn't know what that looked like, but I knew that I couldn't go to Cal State LA and work a full-time job and a part-time job to support myself. So I ended up dropping out of school and I started working at a collection agency, collecting fees, court fees for child support and traffic tickets or whatnot. And then from there, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I loved psychology. I knew I loved people, but I didn't see a path for myself at 18 when I moved out and I'd graduated. So I had become extremely suicidal and depressed. And I made a couple of attempts, which luckily failed. And then I met a woman by the name of Georgiana Rodiger, who became my mentor and my psychologist for the next 10 years after that. So I got really lucky to meet her. I got recruited into a finance company where I started selling life insurance and mortgages, and I didn't need a degree for it. At 19, I went out and got my California state license to sell life insurance. And the combination of working in a finance company that really pushed self-development and really talked about expanding beyond, your current situation and thinking outside of the box and reading books and self-development and listening to people who have made it and not necessarily listening to the people, in your neighborhood or your family, but just listening to people who are in a place that you want to be. Combining that with the mentorship of Georgiana Rodiger as my therapist, I think therapy, everyone should go through therapy. It was the best thing I've ever done in my life. Best investment I've ever, thing I've ever spent money on. And so around that time, my life started to turn around, but not quickly, not without struggle. I started finance in 2006. And as you know, some of you may, depending how old you are, there was a huge market crash in 2008, 2009. So I was 21 years old and making between $5,000 to $7,000 a month. I mean, I was on a high, not every month because I wasn't consistent, but I made really good money for not being educated with a college degree and not really knowing what I was doing with my life. It was pure ambition. It was me door knocking. Voluntarily, I door knocked, and I worked 80 hours a week and voluntarily, and it's just the market crashed and my income dropped so significantly. And I was 22, maybe going on 23. Luckily, Georgie was still around at the time and gave me really good mentorship and guidance through that challenging aspect, because any little thing at the time used to rile me emotionally. I didn't know what to do. I'm like, oh my God, no one's buying, no one's selling. The market's crashed. And my little sister at the time was like, why don't you like try modeling? Or don't you like write poetry? Which I was like a closet poetry writer. Like nobody knew I wrote. And I was surprised she knew I wrote, but she probably found my journal or something. Long story short, I was like, that's the worst idea I've ever heard in my life. There's no way I'm acting. There's no way I'm modeling. There's no way I'm even telling people or speaking about my poetry. But desperate times require desperate measures. So this is when Craigslist was a little bit more prominent. I went on Craigslist, saw an audition for a modeling gig. It was for the Oxygen Channel. I went out for it and I booked it. And I think I made $1,000 for one day of filming. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like I can actually make money doing this in the meantime until the market goes up. So I did that for a little bit, out of desperation, really. And it turned out to be something that was for me that I didn't know. And I feel like in a way I was kind of guided there. I was kind of guided there through circumstance. I don't know. To me, it felt like I was going through transitions and I had these mentorships, and all throughout this time, you know, even through seeing Georgie, I had such terrible negative self-talk. And the only solution for me when it came to negative self-talk was to put someone else's voice in my head, which was to give myself a louder voice than my own. And at the time for me, that was Jim Rohn, the motivational speaker I talked about in the beginning. And whenever I had a negative thought, I'd either call Georgie, and if she wasn't available, I wish I played Jim Rohn tapes. And, you know, he talked about the power of ambition and how ambition and self-development and self-awareness was the key to happiness and success, and just being a person that brings value to the marketplace. And that's essentially, you know, his concepts and his beliefs just changed my thought process, along with a lot of other amazing speakers and books that I read. You know, there's a book that I read called Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz that completely changed my life. And a book by Terry Cole Whitaker called What You Think About Me Is None of My Business. One of my favorite titles for sure. And that book is absolutely incredible. Definitely changed my life. And just the combination of reading these books and getting to know myself and getting to understand my process saved my life in every single way. And so I want to take some of that experience, you know, and share it with you. That's why I'm starting this podcast, because, you know, I've gone through, and there's too many to name, and there's too many stories to tell you all right now. But I've had a really rough time adulting and before adulting. And I think a lot of people have as well. You know, life is a constant school that you're learning from. And I think, you know, we can all learn from each other and from each other's experiences. And I'd like to have those conversations, which is why the podcast is called Power of Ambition, Conversations with NICOLE SERRATO, because this is not going to be just interviewing people about what they're doing. We're going to have conversations that I think we all need to have, and that we all sometimes avoid. So to finish my story and kind of backtrack a little bit, after I started modeling and you know, I was overweight, very, very overweight, twice. And I lost 70 pounds twice. And when I had started modeling, I didn't realize how big I had gotten from the depression. And so I lost 70 pounds and then ended up on a runway, which was absolutely amazing. Like they shut down Hollywood Boulevard and built a runway stage. And that was kind of like the peak of my modeling career. It was only 2 years. But after that, I was like, well, you know, it's not stable income. So I went back to finance. I didn't necessarily think, you know, that acting or modeling or any of these things were going to be my career path. I thought, I miss finance. This is what I know, and I'm going to go back to that. And so I went back to finance, working for a company in Sherman Oaks, focusing this time on like business loans and medical loans. But I wasn't happy, and there was just something missing. I was there for a few years. I was up for a raise. Everybody was up for a raise. And I was starting to feel like I was becoming cynical about life. And I still wasn't sure like what to do or what direction I should be going. I just kept trying things. You know, I was hosting a poetry open mic with Richard Cabral on Lineage Entertainment. And I was modeling, and then I was acting, and then I published a book, a collection of poetry. And I bought a rental property in Florida because I always wanted to own rental property. And I was just trying all these different things. And I was trying to find my niche. And on the outside, I kept getting judgment for it. Like, oh my God, you're 26, you're 27. Like, you need to just settle in a career. Like, you're all over the place. You need to make a decision. And although everyone was coming from a genuine good place with that advice, I didn't feel that way. I felt like I needed to figure out what was for me. And that's around the time that I found Gary Vee. And he had a video up that specifically said, if you're in your 20s and you're not sure what you want to do, this is the time to try everything. And that video, it just gave me so much confidence in what I was already doing, because I had already done what he had said. I had worked my butt off. I had tried different things. I still couldn't figure it out, but by someone like him saying that, I was like, okay, maybe I should trust this process that I'm going through. So I quit finance. I left my job, which is very difficult for me to do. And because it was just a lovely company and my boss was amazing. My coworkers were great. I miss them so much. They know who they are out there in Sherman Oaks. And and it was really difficult for me. And I went to film school and I thought, well, I've hosted an open mic. I've been in front of the camera. I've modeled. I'm kind of like outgoing and outspoken now. And that's the part I kind of skipped. I was super shy in high school, but we'll get to that a different time. So I thought, journalism. I'll go back to school for journalism. I quit school when I was, 18. I'll go back to school and I'll get my degree in journalism and I'll be a journalist because I know how to host and I know how to do these things. And then I went to journalism school, and my dyslexia and my artistic way of writing did not mesh with the way of writing journalist articles, whatnot. So again, I quit my job after my first semester back in college. I was like, oh my God, I already quit and I don't know what I want to do, and it's not journalism. And through a variety of serendipitous events, I had written a poem in my book, and that poem was about my mother's death and her murder and how difficult going through that was for me. And I decided to make it into a film. I just was inspired and I just wanted to try one more thing. So luckily, with a lot of support from my family and friends and all the people who donated, I raised $7,000 and we shot that film. At the second day that we wrapped, I knew that filmmaking was it for me. I had never felt so at home. I had never felt so natural at something. And it was a feeling that I'd never felt with anything I had ever done. From producing it to writing it to acting in it, it's just every single part of the process I was in love with. And it seemed to happen so seamlessly. And, it kind of mind boggles me because people talk about how producing and film is so hard, and it was just really easy for me. It really was. And so that's when I figured out what I wanted to do. And throughout this time, I continued to work on myself and work on self-development and kind of go through, that process, and said, okay, film school, here we come. And then I moved to New York and went to film school, graduated 2020 quarantine, which means I didn't walk the stage, which was really sad for me. I really wanted to walk the stage, but I graduated, and that was the important part. Moved back to LA, decided to get back in front of the camera as an actress, and started this podcast. I think I've caught you up to date for the most part, but you're going to know more about me. You're going to learn more about me throughout this podcast. I'm going to bring on very intentionally guests, and I'm going to curate conversations that I think will bring value to you and helping you in whatever it is that you're looking to develop. Again, this podcast is about conversations on how to elevate and rise above mediocrity in any facet of your life, because what I've learned from being a workaholic in my early 20s is that as much as success is important to your professional life and it's important to your financial life, it's just as important in your personal life when it comes to family, friends, relationships. So we're going to cover all those topics, like how do you be successful in all those facets? And also, if I were to look at myself at age 21, looking at myself now at the age I am, I probably would be disappointed, because my definition of success at 21 is not the success that I'm living at my age at 35. And at 35, my definition of success is so different than what my younger self thought it would be. And there might be people out there, you as well, that think, yeah, I thought I'd be a different place at this age, or I'm exactly where I thought I would be, whatever the case may be for you. But I think it's important that we live our own definition of success. And I can't wait to bring more value to you. I can't wait to get to know my audience members more. Maybe have, I'm going to open up. I want this podcast to be very inclusive. We're going to have guests from different calibers, different backgrounds, different statuses. It's not going to always be someone who's like Mariah, pro football player, because she's pretty awesome. We're going to have people in here who are living their life according to their definition of success and what that looks like for them. And so I'm excited to share that with you. And I'm excited to bring value to you. And I'm excited to share my story. I hope that it helps someone out there. And if you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I will be having like a Q&A at some point and a little blog post about this. But here's to my second podcast. And don't forget to hit and like the subscribe button. That would be super, super helpful. And if you haven't seen the episode with Mariah Lopez, who's a pro football player, make sure to check that out as well. She is an amazing person, athlete, super inspirational, and we have a really good conversation about where that inspiration comes from. So check that out. And I'll see you on the next episode of The Power of Ambition.